What is up, Scream Team? Zach Cherry here, and in this video we're going to be doing another virtual play-by-play mapping out of a specific scene from the Scream franchise where I essentially show you who killed who or who did what, and this time we're going to be looking at Sidney's attack in Scream 1996 that all takes place at her house. So we're going to start on the first night of the film where we're introduced to Sidney, Billy, and Neil Prescott, and this is all taking place sometime soon after the murders of Casey and Steve. And although all of the on-screen Ghostface action we see at this location doesn't occur until the following night, there are several very specific clues that let us know that Stu was also at the house while Billy was in Sidney's bedroom. It is important to note that in Kevin Williamson's original script, it's established that Billy rode his bike out to Sidney's house on both occasions. However, this was a detail that was altered in the finished film.
I was watching TV, I got bored, I decided to go for a ride.
Did you happen to ride by Casey Becker's house?
Although Billy and Sheriff Burke's use of the verb ride instead of drive or drove would be semantically imprecise here, it would still be grammatically correct, meaning that in this scene they are likely discussing him taking out his or his dad's car. However, when you take into context that Billy and Stu would have had to transport Steve to Casey's house and then later transport Neil to Stu's house all on the same night, it becomes implausible to carry out either of those actions, because how is he going to saddle them on his back while he's pedaling down the road? It just doesn't make any sense. But as I'm about to show you, Stu was also present during Billy's first visit to Sidney's house, so it supports the theory that they drove to both locations together. A feature of Sidney's house that is shown to us later is the outdoor stairs that connects the patio deck to a second-story balcony, and this is a very important detail because it establishes another access point for the killers to sneak into the house. Also, this house is built on the side of a hill, so based on the geography here, the best possible route for Billy to get access to Sidney's window is by moving from the patio to the basement awning and then climbing up from the first level side terrace to the awning above it. Now, the first clue that lets us know that Stu is at the house during this scene is by the fact that when we see Neil Prescott, he is wearing this very specific outfit. He also lets Sidney know that he's about to go to bed as he has to be up early in the morning for a business trip. So the next time he is physically on screen is not until the climax. And when Stu pulls him out of the kitchen pantry, we very clearly see that he is still dressed in this exact same outfit. That should let us know that Neil did not actually get a chance to change out of his clothes and go to bed, as Stu had already snuck into the house through the exterior stair access and was waiting for Neil to return to his bedroom to abduct him. And this was all happening while Neil was saying goodnight to Sidney. So when you think about it, this scene is actually doing a lot of narrative work, because it's not just a matter of introducing us to these characters, but it's also showing us how devious the killer's scheme really is everything they do, and by extension everything that Wes Craven is showing us, has a very important intention in telling us this story. We can especially see that here in the way that Billy turns on Sidney's stereo, which then begins to play Gus Black's cover of Don't Fear the Reaper. And we should know that this is source music from the scene, because we can see Sidney motion to Billy to not play the music too loudly, as she's afraid it might draw attention from her father. So while on the surface, Billy's action seems to imply that he's turning on the music to mask the sounds of him and Sidney from her father, the real intention is to mask the sounds of Neil's abduction from Sidney, as that's all going down simultaneously in the other room. Now, because we know that Billy and Stu would have had to drive to Sidney's house together, and the fact that it's later shown that Neil's car was parked nearby Stu's house, this tells us that they took Neil's car at the same time that they abducted him. Otherwise, Sidney might have woken up for school the next morning and seen her father's car was still at home. In fact, it was originally written in the script that she wakes up early and sees her father getting into his car and drive off. But again, there is a very specific reason that scene never made it to production, because it creates a discrepancy in the timeline of Neil's kidnapping. So what most likely happened is that Billy and Stu loaded Neil into Neil's car and then waited until Sidney went to sleep, as the garage is situated 2 stories below her bedroom window. From there, Stu drove Neil's car car with Neil tied up and went directly to his house, where he would not have to worry about any interference from his parents, as, we later find out, and it's well established, that they are out of town and won't be back for several days. Billy, on the other hand, would then take his car home by himself, where even if his father had noticed him missing for a few hours, this story would still be corroborated later by Sidney at the police station, so either way, it ultimately checks out for Billy's alibi. So now we're on to the next day. The characters have gone to school, found out about Casey and Steve, they're interviewing students in the principal's office, the characters are congregating at the water fountain. So after school, Billy and Stu come back to Sidney's house, and this is another angle that supports the fact that Billy drove his car, because they all would have gotten out of school at the same time, but while Sidney took the school bus, which would have taken a little bit longer to get home, Billy and Stu would have got there first in his car. Only this time, since they've already abducted Neil, they wouldn't have to sneak in any upstairs doors or windows, because they would now have possession of his house keys and could freely come and go at their convenience. Now, it is important to note that Stu is already inside the house before Sidney arrives, and Billy would likely be hiding in the trees just off the property, but we should know this because after her phone call to Tatum, Sidney comes downstairs to get her overnight bag, and we can see that she's carrying her clothes for the next day, which I always love. That's such a cool detail. But she comes down the stairs and opens up the closet where Stu later jumps out from, only nobody is in the closet. But Stu is definitely in the house at this point, and there are a few audio clues that let us know this. Firstly, when Sidney goes to sit down in the den, we can hear a very distinct sound right after she turns on the TV.
The bodies of 17-year-old Kate. The bodies of 17-year-old Kate. The bodies of 17-year-old Kate.
You really can't miss it, but it kind of sounds like some sort of solid object bouncing off the floor. This was likely the moment where Stu went to hide inside the closet, as he would have just seen Sidney get her overnight bag and probably figured she was unlikely to go back there for anything else. The second sound clue happens after Sidney turns off the TV and walks back to the front of the house. This one, however, is a very noticeable moment, but she hears a distinct creaking sound that is coming from the direction of the closet, and she stops for a moment to ponder it, but ultimately she chooses to ignore it and then goes to have a nap in the living room. Now, it is possible that Stu could have snuck into the house between 5:45 and 7:15, which, as we're shown by the clock, this is the time where Sidney would have been sleeping, but if he does it that way, then he risks waking her up, and I think the earlier sound design is very intentional to let us know that he was already in the closet. And that's kind of what I love so much about this movie and, any Wes Craven movie, because he's all about these little details, and it really allows you to rewatch this so many times and pick up on these little hints that are just layered everywhere here and there. But anyway, time has passed now, it is night, and just to try and understand the psychology of what Billy and Stu are doing here, they're obviously not trying to kill Sidney at this point. They were waiting for the exact anniversary of her mother's death, but this was clearly a way to not only make her feel more vulnerable, but also for Billy to frame himself as a suspect who is then later exonerated, thereby creating the optics of his innocence. This is very much an intentional part of his plan. I don't think that either Billy or Stu would be sloppy enough to get caught by accident this early on, and that especially makes sense with Stu calling Sidney at Tatum's house later on, while Billy has the alibi of being held in a jail cell overnight. So the plan here was likely for Billy to harass Sidney over the phone with the voice changer, which he could do while watching her, as there are multiple windows and vantage points for him to be looking into the house from. But when it comes to baiting her to go outside to the front porch, her coming back inside would have been Stu's signal to lunge out and attack her after having been waiting in there for the last 90 minutes. Even as she runs upstairs, Billy would have the vantage point from the window at the back to see all that action and know that he can now go and climb up to the second story. So after Sidney has been locked in her room for a time, Stu knows the police are likely going to be on their way. So he exits, and specifically, he exits out the front door. And we should know this for two reasons. Because first of all, the chain lock is attached earlier before Sidney runs upstairs, but after she's run back downstairs, she immediately opens the door without having to unlock the chain first. first, so that lets us know that it would have already been unlocked. And then second of all, the ghost face mask is left behind on the front porch for the police to find when they arrive. I'm not sure why Stu leaves the mask, other than the fact that he and Billy may have had the foresight to know multiple students would find out about it and then procure masks of their own, which would then create mass hysteria and multiple diversions around town. But for as logical as this movie is, there are still a few incongruities that demand we don't overthink things too much, and the Ghostface mask and costume continuity is really the only major question if you really want to get OCD about it. I want to thank my Patreon supporter Michelle Hughes. If you want to see more of these mapping videos, you can check out this playlist here. I'm making my way through the entire Scream franchise before I eventually redo my Who Killed Who in Screams 1 to 4 videos. But until next time, thank you for watching. I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.